What if the woman standing behind the largest royal scandal was actually under investigation by two intelligence agencies? The answer remains permanently locked inside the captured German records known as the Marburg files. Two of the world's most powerful intelligence organizations investigated a single individual. The abdication was never merely a tragic romantic crisis about forbidden love and a vacant throne. It constituted a full-scale security breach that threatened the foundation of the British government. The Federal Bureau of Investigation launched extensive surveillance operations across multiple continents. Meanwhile, British Military Intelligence Section 5 compiled detailed reports documenting her active connection with the acting Nazi foreign minister. During this volatile period, both agencies directed their resources strictly toward top-tier state threats. This operational focus effectively elevated Wallis Simpson to the status of a severe national security risk. The eventual declassification of these intelligence dossiers transferred the narrative from persistent rumor into documented historical fact. Inside St. George's Chapel, the royal family gathered, April 1986. Wallis Simpson's name remained locked within British intelligence vaults. Now the Crown officially erased it from public history. The slow process of erasure began 14 years earlier. In May 1972, Edward died in Paris from throat cancer. The exiled couple left no heirs. The woman who manipulated monarchs and terrified intelligence directors died paralyzed and alone. A series of strokes dismantled her physical form. Severe arthritis twisted her joints. Bone damage warped her fingers into unrecognizable shapes. The platinum wedding ring, the precise piece of jewelry that cost a king his empire, slipped off. It could no longer fit on her deformed hand. By 1980, she lost her ability to speak. She lay bedridden inside the Villa Windsor, a grand 14-room estate. The city of Paris leased the property to the couple for a token rent of 50 francs a year. Medical staff fed her liquid nutrition through a plastic tube. Phonograph records played softly in the shadows of the empty bedroom. The needle scratched against the vinyl. The faint music provided a futile barrier against her advancing dementia. On April 24, 1986, her lungs failed. Bronchial pneumonia claimed her at age 89. The British government orchestrated her final return across the Channel. The heavy wooden casket arrived at Windsor Castle. The Queen and the Queen Mother stood silently in the front pews of St. George's Chapel. Princess Diana observed the ceremony nearby. She later noted it was the only time she ever saw the Queen Mother weep. Strict protocol dictated their physical attendance. Diplomatic rules required a formal royal ceremony for the Duke of Windsor's widow. Yet the ensuing silence delivered a definitive state sentence. The funeral stripped away her individual identity. Priests led the traditional rites over the closed coffin. Attendants lowered her body into the earth at the royal burial ground at Frogmore. The royal family conducted the entire memorial service without uttering Wallis Simpson's name once. Outwardly, their return to post-war France seemed a triumph. High society, sparkling jewels, legendary dinner parties. In reality, they lived under the shadow of Third Reich documents. That nameless 1986 funeral was sealed decades earlier. It began with the Marburg files. American troops discovered 400 tons of hidden German archives. Captured Nazi records were published. London knew everything. The mechanics of exposure were simple. Ink on paper. Cold bureaucratic language crashed against Parisian glamour. Intelligence suspicions transformed into hard evidence. Operation Willi existed. Berlin possessed plans. The unsealed documents confirmed their status as Adolf Hitler's political asset. 7,000 kilometers of the Atlantic Ocean. The Marburg files surprised nobody. At the height of the global conflict, Winston Churchill had already executed an emergency protocol of geographic quarantine. Intelligence reports detailing the royal couple's movements crossed the Prime Minister's desk in Whitehall. Churchill reviewed the intercepted dispatches and drafted an unyielding relocation order for the former monarch. He exiled Edward to Nassau. The physical distance stretching from London to the Bahamas exceeded 7,000 kilometers, removing the strategic threat. The distance secured the realm. This vast expanse of the Atlantic Ocean created a secure barrier. It prevented any direct contact between the exiled pair and German intelligence agents. Nassau delivered heavy tropical heat that stifled the ambitions of the isolated couple. The archipelago had been a quiet crown colony for over 2 centuries. To them, the assignment was not a prestigious colonial posting, but a deliberate political erasure. During this Caribbean confinement, Edward openly praised German social organization to his visitors. He made remarks that closely echoed the established talking points of the Third Reich. These specific pro-German statements made in Nassau would later form the primary foundation for the damning post-war investigative conclusions. Churchill deliberately orchestrated this distant exile to counter a direct scheme from Berlin intended to capture the British throne. How did the German command plan to gain control over Great Britain in the summer of 1940? Through the physical capture of the former monarch in Portugal. The distant isolation in the Bahamas became necessary specifically because Adolf Hitler launched Operation Willi. The goal was simple: seize the Duke of Windsor, hold him under house arrest until the island surrendered, install him as a puppet king. Berlin viewed the former sovereign as a direct instrument to govern the country without resistance. The romanticized story of a royal couple in love masked a strict military calculation. June 1940. France collapsed. 6 weeks. That was all it took to dismantle the French defense lines. The Duke and Duchess joined the exodus. Tens of thousands of people clogged the dirt roads heading south. Cars ran out of fuel. Families walked on foot. Vehicles crawled toward the border of Francoist Spain. The royal couple eventually crossed the peninsula and reached neutral Portugal. By that summer, Lisbon had absorbed over 100,000 European refugees. The local population stood at just around 600,000 residents. This meant 1 in 7 people on the streets was a newly arrived foreigner. This human tide provided ideal cover for intelligence work. Hitler deployed Walter Schellenberg to coordinate the capture. German agents infiltrated the capital under diplomatic cover. They tracked the couple's daily movements across the city. Telegraph machines clattered without pause inside the German embassy. Operators transmitted encrypted updates back to Berlin. The intelligence network prepared the logistics for an armed abduction. The Nazi leadership considered the Duke a willing asset. They relied on his wife's established connections to Joachim von Ribbentrop and other senior Berlin officials. The threat of a compromised throne forced London to react. Winston Churchill dispatched an urgent order to relocate the Duke across the Atlantic. For the first time in modern history, one reigning British monarch lost access to his own government intelligence. The subsequent Lisbon operation relied on extensive dossiers compiled over years by MI5 operatives and J. Edgar Hoover's department. The breach started at a simple bedside table. MI5 placed Wallis under active observation. Director Vernon Kell locked these surveillance documents in his personal safe, hiding them even from the cabinet. Across the Atlantic, J. Edgar Hoover assembled a parallel file. Duke Karl Alexander of Württemberg directly told investigators that Wallis and Joachim von Ribbentrop were former lovers. The American records documented her continuous communication with Berlin. The crisis shifted toward direct espionage. Senior Foreign Office official Robert Vansittart reviewed intelligence detailing a systematic extraction of classified data. The reports suggested Wallis extracted state secrets directly from Edward and forwarded them to Nazi Germany. Foreign Secretary Anthony Eden executed a constitutional maneuver to seal the leak. A formal mandate officially restricted the delivery of sensitive intelligence materials to the king. Why did German officials personally invite the Duke of Windsor to Berchtesgaden in the autumn of 1937? To demonstrate international support for their political course. The secret MI5 dossiers expanded rapidly in October 1937 when the couple embarked on this official tour of Germany. The British Crown officially denied Wallis the title of Royal Highness. The German authorities organized a state-level reception. Edward and Wallis had married in France on June 3, 1937. 4 months later, they crossed the German border. The itinerary was precise. The couple toured massive industrial factories, They inspected the newly paved Autobahn highways. The Duke and Duchess stood smiling next to high-ranking officials of the Reich. The international press captured every step. Flashbulbs fired in rapid succession on the stone steps of the Berchtesgaden residence. The Berghof estate sat at an elevation of 1,000 meters in the Bavarian Alps. It was the second government headquarters of the Third Reich. There, they sat face-to-face with Adolf Hitler. The resulting photographs traveled across the globe. London saw propaganda triumph. But British intelligence tracked a more specific threat. Joachim von Ribbentrop, the foreign minister and former ambassador to London, knew Wallis Simpson personally. He cultivated their connection during his diplomatic posting. Rumors circulated within MI5. The details in the reports were highly specific. Ribbentrop had sent her 17 carnations. What 100 million listeners perceived as a romantic gesture, London agencies classified as a security threat. The subsequent German tour became possible only following a constitutional collapse, striking the British capital. The crisis began unfolding after the death of King George V in January 1936. The successor declared his intention to marry a twice-divorced American bearing a highly compromising intelligence file. The British Empire controlled a quarter of the globe during this era, sending institutional shockwaves through administrative centers from Ottawa to New Delhi. Prime Minister Stanley Baldwin delivered a strict ultimatum regarding the integrity of the state apparatus. The government and the extended dominions refused to accept the royal proposition under any terms. The monarch faced a choice between abandoning the relationship or dismantling his own parliament. He chose abdication in December 1936, after reigning for less than 12 months. The king delivered a farewell address, framing the destabilization of the crown as a personal sacrifice. Global audiences wept over the final broadcast, while Whitehall officials calculated the sweeping strategic damage. This massive public radio transmission would soon transform the former monarch into a perfect target for foreign intelligence operations in Lisbon. Dominion governments prepared for the worst. How did an American expatriate infiltrate the closed Windsor court? Through a 1927 divorce. Then came a strategic move. The 1936 political crisis was merely the surface. The true foundation was laid earlier, in London. In 1928, Wallis sat at the London dinner table. She never bowed. She challenged opinions. She argued loudly with Edward. The other guests froze. A stunned silence gripped the dining room. Only the sharp clatter of silver cutlery against porcelain broke the tension. She treated the Prince of Wales like a simple commoner. That was the calculation. She married Ernest Simpson in July 1928. He was an Anglo-American shipping executive. He offered steady wealth. He offered access. London became her operational base. She navigated the elite social circuit. She collected political connections. She bypassed the rigid British aristocracy. She aimed high. The ultimate target was Edward, the most eligible bachelor alive. The stakes were immense. By 1934, the British Empire spanned 35 million square kilometers. It covered a quarter of the globe. It held 450 million subjects. Edward was the direct heir to all of it. He hated the crown. The constant royal duties suffocated him. Wallis offered a psychological exit. She did not soften her words. She stripped away his aristocratic isolation. Edward fell fast. He was completely under her control. It was a calculated social campaign. Romance was secondary. Power was the objective. She isolated the future monarch. By January 1934, the transition was complete. She became his mistress. The sudden shift in power terrified the British establishment. Whispers spread rapidly through the royal palaces. Staff witnessed them together multiple times. Edward furiously denied the rumors, but the intelligence dossiers were already open. King George V finally received the detailed security report outlining his son's affair with the American. A United States Navy officer departs for a lengthy overseas deployment, leaving his young wife entirely to her own devices. Wallis forged the skills required to manipulate a future monarch a full decade before London. shaping them across diplomatic circuits from Washington to Beijing. In 1916, 20-year-old Wallis married Earl Winfield Spencer, an aviation officer whose severe alcoholism resulted in frequent, prolonged absences. She utilized this isolation to construct her own diplomatic and intelligence network. She initiated a relationship with Argentine diplomat Felipe de Espil, who introduced her to the intricate European style of political maneuvering. On paper, she existed merely as the neglected wife of a naval aviator. In reality, she operated as a prominent figure in intelligence dossiers, cultivating high-level contacts from Argentina to fascist Italy. Her geographical reach expanded as she relocated to China, infiltrating the highly restricted diplomatic clubs of Beijing. Heavy humidity and the distinct scent of dark tobacco permeated the foreign ambassadorial residences, where whispers about her connections circulated freely. During her time in the East, she established an intimate bond with Count Galeazzo Ciano. Ciano would subsequently secure the position of foreign minister in fascist Italy, ultimately signing the Pact of Steel with Berlin. Intelligence circles scrutinized her activities, documenting rumors regarding a medical procedure during her involvement with the Italian count. She integrated into the highest tiers of international politics long before encountering the British throne. The deteriorating marriage collapsed under the combined weight of spousal addiction and her expanding international ambitions. The court finalized their official divorce in December 1927. Where did this cold obsession originate? The answer lies in Pennsylvania. June 19, 1896. Her diplomatic grip directly answered her early poverty. Bessie Wallace Warfield arrived with nothing. Her father died. Teakle Wallace Warfield left 0 assets. Her mother survived on family charity. Alice Montague begged for survival. They lived near extreme wealth. They possessed none. This proximity burned. She watched the rich carefully. She memorized their posture. She analyzed voices. She filed away their tactics. In 1912, the landscape shifted. Relatives funded her education. She entered Oldfield School in Maryland. $1,000 a year to sit with the state elite. This equaled a vast fortune for a widow. Wallis treated the school like a battlefield. She dressed sharply. She outworked girls born into money. Every interaction served a purpose. She constructed a polished facade. She performed wealth seamlessly. Poverty built a calculating social architect. She lacked aristocratic blood. She replaced it with cold discipline. Armed with this social weaponry, 20-year-old Wallis executed her first maneuver and entered her first marriage in 1916. 50 years in exile. The penniless girl from Pennsylvania navigated her way into the highest echelons of Nazi Germany. She wielded enough political leverage to shatter the British throne. But the finale of this diplomatic trajectory proved different. She spent her last decades hidden away on a vast estate in the Bois de Boulogne. The French government provided this Parisian villa for a merely nominal rent. Global influence vanished behind those iron gates. Severe physical isolation replaced the royal receptions. The woman who once manipulated empires now faced only empty rooms. In 1986, she died in Paris, without a voice, without power, in total isolation.